The transition into the winter of 237 BC did not come without trial, as pirates continued to pester the Greek fleets with overwhelming numbers. And as predicted, the people of Ariminum riot. The barely trained and minimal number of peasants were not enough to keep the plebs content. No matter though, the reinforcements arrive, and with the commitment of enough of the population into basic training, the peoples of Ariminum would be content for now. With everything seemingly settled in his new cities, Hero makes his way north for Mediolanum. The Gaul had been pestering him long enough, it was time to bring the fight back to them. Telemacho leads the way, but through a single misstep, Telemacho does not make it into Mediolanum alive. A Scipii army still lingered on Greek soil, perhaps a little money would make this problem go away. Such a shame, we'll just have to use other means to get rid of him. Over the winter, Mediolanum appeared to have reinforced itself, not that it would do them any good in the long run. Hero marches forth and besieges the city, building his 3 rams. The Gaul had a good mix of troops, including chosen swordsmen. With diplomacy off the tables, it was time for another form of negotiation. Damastor sizes Lentulus up for a moment and then strikes. The Scipii boy would no longer be a problem. If anything, his death has greatly benefited us. Damastor has rose to the top of the ranks and has become a master assassin. With one foe out of the way, it was time to deal with another. The rams were ready, and so too was Hero. Versicius the Mad. Stern, harsh, dangerously mad, and likes a drink. It appeared that Hero would be doing the Gaul a favour in removing this man from the world. Lined up before the front gate, the Cretans get to work, thinning the Gaul down. And just our luck, Versicius has graced us with his presence. With a hail of arrows, the general falls, the rest of his bodyguard not far behind. The Cretans continued to work their magic on the Gaul that waited for the Spartans to arrive. The gates fall open and the Cretans continue to clear the way for the Greek infantry. The Spartans enter the city with barely any opposition. Gaul swordsmen try to repel the invaders, but their short swords are nothing compared to the length of the Spartan spears. Their numbers thinned courtesy of the Cretans, the chosen swordsmen, the elite infantry of the Gaul, come charging into the line of ready Spartans. Seeing the warband in front of them fleeing made them uneasy, but they carried on and collided with the wall of spears. The Cretans fired down on their unshielded sides, and the swordsmen held valiantly, cutting down 3 Spartans in the end as their numbers slowly fell. Enough was enough. The Spartans had better things to do than fight these swordsmen all day. The other 2 units of Spartans pushed through the lines. The sight of over 300 extra Spartans was enough to send the cowards fleeing. The Cretans were happy to shoot them in the backs too. The Spartans advanced through the city, the Cretans with arrows remaining close behind. They easily repel all those who came running at them. More heavy infantry tried to hold the Spartans back, but like the rest of their kinsmen, they don't last long against them. The Greeks take position at the mouth of the street to the plaza, with the Cretans having a clear view onto the plaza. Any Gaul who tried to advance would quickly turn tail and run back to relative safety. This would continue until the last few Gaul remained, and the Cretans, with the last of their arrows, finished the siege of Mediolanum. It was a good battle, with minimal losses. The city is captured and the unhappy barbarian peasants were slaughtered. In Thessalonica, Xanthippus is almost ready to leave on his campaign. Stepping outside the city, he gathers together his troops. Thessalonica is emptied of her armoured hoplites, and militia cavalry is brought over from Bylazora. He needs only a couple more archers, and Xanthippus would be ready to be unleashed upon the world. The winter comes to its end, and during the transition to summer, we are once again reminded that our fleets are not our strongest point, suffering defeat after defeat after defeat, and an average defeat. To no one's surprise, the Gaul had agents where they weren't supposed to be, though to be fair we were doing the same, only more successfully. News from the east arrives with word that the Armenians had been destroyed, though the note tacked on suggesting that Hellenic courage played a part in their falling was perhaps a bit of a stretch. With the rest of his army in place, Xanthippus was ready to go. He makes his way east to Byzantium, stopping at the border to build a watchtower. also received word that Segesta has been besieged by the Spanish. How odd. Surely the Spaniards had better things to be doing than invading Greek lands? A single unit of Iberian infantry. The odds would be even, but it might be better to wait for backup. It appeared that the Scipii were embarking on a last-ditch attempt to retake Italy, loading up another ship with most of their military. It was silly of them to think that their plan would go through. Their fleet is chased down and Admiral Marcus and another Roman army join their brethren at the bottom of the ocean, where they belong. With enough peasants to manage the city, Hero leaves Mediolanum, embarking on his quest for Batavium. Amnestos splits off to the south. He had defended Croton and Rome, and so he would do so for Segesta. He does not quite reach the Spanish army, but he was close enough to reinforce the city if it came to it. He also hires some barbarian mercenaries for extra support. Greek agents patrolled around Sicily, keeping an eye on and eliminating targets as needs be. The last Romans were down to 3 family members: the faction leader in the Libyum, the heir in Syracuse, and the new blood who stood outside Messana. Let's just make that 2 family members, shall we? While we're at it, we would not let them leave this island, nor shall we allow them to trade with the outside world. Either starvation would get them, or the inevitable Greek invasion. Xanthippus finally makes it to Byzantium, and following in his father's footsteps, builds 3 rams. The Thracians didn't stand a chance. Master Assassin Damastor continues his fine work in the north, clearing the way for Hero, his next target being Drustan of Aleva. With an apprentice watching on, Damastor sneaks up to his target, brushing past a Briton diplomat. And with practiced ease of a master assassin, Damastor eliminates his target without even looking at him. It appeared as though Hero's journey to Batavium would not go unhindered. The Gaul had sent a large force, their destination no doubt Mediolanum, and Hero wasn't about to let his hard work go to waste. Hero attacks and pursues, eventually forcing the Gaul up against the city they wished to retake. The peasants of Mediolanum were eager to help Hero, but with the Gaul force consisting of mostly warband, with the occasional fun unit thrown in there, Hero wouldn't be requiring their help, though he did appreciate the gesture. The battlefield was densely forested, the barbarians clearly in their element, and with that came confidence. Confidence in their own ability to repel fire arrow as their general goes racing ahead of his troops. The trees did not seem to hinder the Cretans as they took down most of the barbarian cavalry, the unit fleeing before it even made it to the Spartans. The Gaul infantry line was much longer than the Greeks, and as such they were able to surround the sides of the Spartans. They had yet to make their move though. In the meantime, the Druids engaged in their chanting, their strange tones seemingly inspiring the troops around them. The Gauls on the right flank decided that now was their time to charge. The Spartans readjusted to face the Gaul better, and Hero came charging through, losing about 20 of his own horsemen to his own Spartans. Startled by this loss, he pulls back to the middle of his force, and the Spartans move once more to catch the Gaul. The other flank was faring much better. The Gaul had yet to charge, and those closest were already fleeing. With most of the Gaul gone from the front line, the Spartans could focus on the flanks. The Cretans had done a wonderful job of breaking the closest unit of warband, but more Gaul still remained. Back on the other side, the Spartans began to advance to mop up their remaining barbarians, and the extra Spartans now with the right flank, they too could march out to the Gaul. The Gaul do not last long against the might of Sparta, and once more the Greek cavalry are deployed to cut down the running men. The last man is killed and the battle ends. 100 Gaul made it off the field today. Hopefully it will be enough of a warning against future incursions. With the Gaul dealt with, it was time for the Spanish to be removed. Amnestos attacks, and the Spaniards wisely back away. But it did not stop the youngest son of Sparta. With overwhelming odds in his favour, Amnestos jumps into the battle. The barbarian mercenaries give out mighty war cries as Amnestos made his way behind the Iberian infantry. When their throats are hoarse from the shouts, the mercenaries charge into the Spanish, surrounding them and holding them in place while their general finished manoeuvring. Defeat was imminent for the Iberians, and it was even more apparent when the heavy cavalry charged into their backs. The men flee and Nestos chases them down, earning himself an easy victory. If Segesta defended, he returned north to rendezvous with his father. As summer draws to its end, the Thracians approach with much to say, with both words and blade. It was wishful thinking that Xanthippus' first siege would go without a hitch, but the Thracians like to throw spanners in the works, so why stop now? The Thracians had a good mix of troops. Militia hoplites would be quick to run, but those forksmen and phalanx pikemen would be an interesting bunch. Xanthippus had the advantage, and at any rate, it just meant one less Thracian army to deal with later. The two armies meet in the middle of the field, the force of Byzantium nowhere to be seen. As the hoplites reached their positions, the militia cavalry were deployed on the flanks to harass the approaching infantry. The Thracian line was wider and they were starting to slip around the sides, and to top it off, the force of Byzantium had arrived on the battlefield. The Greeks needed to speed this up if they didn't want more heavy infantry charging into their rear. Bastane, mercenaries that Xanthippus had hired for the sieges, charged into the forksmen that had tried to slip behind the Greeks' line. Out of javelins, the militia cavalry throw themselves into battle too, with varying success. Through a lucky shot, the Thracian captain goes down, and it seemed to be enough to trigger a rout amongst most of his army. With one flank now cleared, the armoured hoplites could redeploy to face the army of Byzantium, who were quite rapidly appearing from over the hill. The other flank cleared too, more hoplites joined the new line. The militia cavalry that were chasing down the remaining stragglers were recalled back to the line, and it appeared that the hoplites had made it just in time to face the Byzantines. Perhaps it was fortunate that the hoplites were still on their way to their positions, as the angles they were coming from surrounded the Thracians. Some were still able to slip around the sides, but with almost half of the Byzantine Thracians already routing, the hoplites weren't stretched overly thin. While the Byzantium front was doing well, the back was not so pretty. Filled with routing men and those whose courage had plucked back up, it was a hectic mess of men. And with some gentle encouragement in the form of militia cavalry to the back, the Byzantine captain broke and only a few full units remained on the field. The armoured hoplites congregated on these remaining men, while what remained of the cavalry chased down the routing Thracians. The mere sight of hundreds of hoplites approaching was enough to deter some of the Thracians, others were a bit more stubborn. But as stubborn as they were, in the end they too are no match compared to the strength and overwhelming numbers of the Greek hoplites. The last few units are sent running and the cavalry pursue where they can. With less than 300 men remaining, the Thracians didn't even have 10% of their original force, which meant for an easy occupation of Byzantium for Xanthippus. While the Thracians did share some cultural heritage with the Greeks, Xanthippus did not intend to stay for long, and so extermination ensured that the population would remain happy in his absence. In northern Italy, the Gaul had not given up in their attempts to delay Hero, though with mostly warband, they were just a little speed bump. The agents on Sicily had brought troubling news. They had discovered Roman troops that were better armed, trained and organised. They heard whispers of a reform. Despite having the troops, Messana was not the source. Syracuse had a damned imperial palace. Those damned Romans just couldn't stay out of trouble, could they? It was fortunate that Dymas had crossed over from Apollonia not long ago with the intention to clear out Sicily, and his army was almost ready. Back to the north, there was a speed bump to deal with. If anything, this would just be a warm-up for Hero before the siege of Batavium. The Gauls stretched before the Greek line, stopping mere meters in front of them, the ideal place for the Cretans to shoot them with ease. Hero moves around the side to flush out any hidden barbarians and to manoeuvre for potential flanking. The archers had done well reducing the centre of the Gaul line, but enough time had been spent standing around. It was time for action. Hero gave the orders and the Spartans marched forth into the Gaul infantry. Shocked by the Greeks' audacity, a good majority of lily-livered barbarians broke rank and fled. The Gaul on the flanks remained and some stragglers in the centre, but Spartan steel was quick to send them running once more. With enough of the Gaul running, some of the cavalry was deployed to sweep them up, and the Spartans continued to surround those who were left. Soon enough, the entire opposing army was running, and the full force of Greek cavalry were unleashed upon the Gaul.
The enemy's hearts are full of fear, and now they flee.
Hero hadn't realised that his bodyguard had gained fancy new hats. He liked them, they kind of matched his own. With much gusto, he helped cut down the last few Gaul men remaining on the field. And with that, the speed bump was removed. The way to Batavium was clear. No more distractions. The spy infiltrates the city first, and Damastor destroys the Hall of Heroes for fun.
Assassin ready, closing in for the kill.
And with no more opposition, Hero besieges the Gaul city. Perfect! The gates were open and welcoming for Hero. The Spartans had approached the city from all three gates, the Cretans having cleared the way for them. It wasn't a particularly tough battle, just tedious as they made their way through the city and Gaul infantry, until they surrounded the central plaza. Coming in from all sides, the Spartans quickly cut down the remaining Gaul, and with the loss of only 20 men, Batavium was theirs. Hero captures the city and removes the unhappy people. Once more, our favourite Romans had put together a transport fleet containing their newly outdated troops, and so the Greek fleets attack and they pursue. Surrounding the Scipii boats, the Greeks sent them fleeing,
Prepare to engage! Ships ready! Attack!
and just when the Romans thought they were safe, the Greeks struck again.
Ready! Set sail!
The Romans escape out of reach, but the pirates are prolific around these parts. It was highly doubtful that the Romans would make it back. With Batavium left in capable hands, Hero continues on his conquest. His next target, Massilia. Dimas makes his way south, ready to gather his army around Croton. In Sparta, it had been believed that the way of the Spartan hoplites had been lost with Cleomenes, but through time and research the technique was rediscovered. Sparta could once more produce her magnum opus. Summer turns to winter and the Thracians return for the much-awaited third rematch at Bylazora. Did they really expect a different outcome this time? In other news, Hero's first grandson was born. Welcome to the world, Nicodromos of Sparta, firstborn of Aemnestos. And to think that this family started off with only 3 members. Dimas is loaded up with troops. He just needed a couple more militia cavalry and he would be ready to go and defeat some Romans. On the other side of the world, Xanthippus was ready to capture his next city. The spy leads the way to the Thracian capital. He slips into the city and relays the garrison information back to Xanthippus. With most of his men refreshed in Byzantium, the general marches on for Tylis. Hero continues his journey to Gaul territory, making it to the mouth of the valley that separated them. A diplomat scouted ahead, catching a glimpse at the target city. The garrison was most certainly not empty. It was time for Aristonitus to defend Bylazora once more. The Thracians just never learnt to stop, did they? The Greeks had the numbers and range advantage, and the Thracians didn't exactly send the good stuff either. Mukos was a decent general, but that was all he was. Decent. Once the Thracians are far away enough from the city gates, the militia cavalry come out, harassing the mercenary hoplites, the weak point of the Thracian army. The though the militia eventually ran out of javelins and the armoured hoplites and archers emerged from the city. The militia were still perfectly fine cavalry, and while they may not have had javelins, they still had swords. They looped behind the Thracian line and charged into the vulnerable missile units with some varying success. Some of the militia clipped into the hoplites and immediately broke, and the others were intercepted by the general. The second wave had a bit better success. They dealt with the archers, but when some tried to take down the Illyrian mercenaries, they brushed against the phalanx pikemen in front and they too immediately broke. But apparently the militia's endless attempts at throwing themselves at the Thracians were enough to make them want to leave, and the call for retreat was given. The remaining militia tried to take out as many of the weaker units as they could. Eventually the last man leaves the field and Bylazora had once more been defended from the Thracians. The weakened army retreats back to their side of the border and Aristonitus becomes a good commander. At the end of winter, Xanthippus is once more attacked by the Thracians on the open field. An odd decision, seeing as the odds were in the Greeks' favours, but no matter, a good Thracian was a dead Thracian. The two lines meet in the centre and the militia cavalry get to work on the flanks of the Thracians, while the archers dealt with those in the middle. The Thracian captain placed himself at the forefront of his line, and the archers are quick to send him running in fear.
The enemy general flees! Press forward so that the spirit of his army is a broken tool!
The militia cavalry continue to harass the back and side of the Thracian force. When the javelins run out, they charge into the missile units, breaking them, as well as the occasional unit of straggling forcemen. Soon enough, most of the force is running home and the cavalry take chase, the presence alone enough to cow some of the toughest men. They charge into the forcemen with no issues, and even the elite phalanx pikemen were no issue for the intimidating militia cavalry.
The gods be praised! The enemy's hearts are full of fear, and now they flee!
Xanthippus helps cut down the last men, and with that another monumental victory was his. Hero continued his journey to Massilia. Well, the Gaul appeared to have it very well occupied, didn't they? In front of Xanthippus, two Thracian armies stood their ground, until he went to attack them. They retreated back towards their capital, and Xanthippus was not one to turn down a fight. He pursues and engages with the Thracian general. But that battle would have to wait until next time. Hi there everyone, thank you all so much for watching, and thank you to all of the new subscribers. You will really make my day. Feel free to comment down below or even just leave a like if you enjoyed the video. I'll be putting up a small channel update video this week going over what's going to happen when this series is over, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you all again, and I'll see you next time. Bye!